we're the Johnsons, and we're descendants from James Harding Sr. Actually, we learned from our family history through our grandfather, who was William Howard Harding. And he's the one that connected us to our great aunts and uncles. It's amazing because we knew most of them. They were still, we saw most of them, I think 5 were still living. Am I correct? When we were around?
Right, we knew 4.
4, okay.
Yeah, 4 were still living.
Uh-huh.
They were part of our lives growing up.
Yes.
And these were our great aunts and uncles.
Great.
Great aunts and uncles. Wow, I just thought about that.
Yeah, great.
Okay.
There was Uncle Felix, Uncle Doug, Uncle Adam, and Aunt Sadie. They were still living. And from young kids, our grandfather, who is the grandson of James Harding Sr., took us to his grave site. Therefore, we knew where his grave site was and where his children were buried from young. And all we knew was Grandpa. We see pictures, that's Grandpa. So we referred, as Grandpas. In fact, we started learned to drive in the cemetery.
In the cemetery.
And I'm talking about young. Yeah. I'm talking about 12, 13 years old.
It was 10 for me.
Okay. My grandfather
at 12 years old, my grandfather had me drive the stationary around the block. 12.
We'd be at the cemetery, get in the car, and bring the car around to Grandpa's grave. And we know where Grandpa's grave was. And that was 8 grave sites that was purchased in 1930. Those 8 grave sites in Greenwood cost $50. And that is where Mike Harding, who is the son of James, Sally, the wife of James, James Harding, James Sr., Hiram, Felix, Sadie, and Sadie's first husband are buried. Abraham Gleaves,
yes.
Yeah. And the headstone says Harding Gleaves, because at the time Sadie was married to Abraham Gleaves, and he's buried there also.
It's interesting, as Carmen, you're reading off the grave sites. As you were talking about, I'll refer to my grandfather's Daddy Howard, because that's what we all called him. That I did not realize when he took us there that his grandfather, I knew he was born in 1800. I didn't realize he was born a slave. I didn't realize his history. I saw the pictures of him and Daddy Howard together and of his uncle, but I didn't realize his history until you shared that article. It's like, wow. And of course, then I went and read it to India because I wanted her to know, hey, I'm not that far removed from someone who was born into slavery.
Yeah. And I didn't realize it until I was an adult. Once you start looking at the birth dates, and I'm saying, wait a minute, this man was born into slavery.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But you say that, but see the pictures here. We saw these pictures at the visits we had. It was in one of them was in the front room, and I asked my grandfather. I said, "Who's that white man?" She said, "He said that's Grandpa." I said, "No, I'm talking about this white man in this picture with this colored lady." And he said that was my grandfather. So, and there was another picture here, and we're sitting. I think it was James Sr., my grandfather, Daddy Howard, and that was Uncle Hines, right? By the building. Hiram. And he looked like he was old then, I guess. I said, "Who's that white woman there in the middle?" He said, "That's Grandpa." So it really became interesting to me because now his father was James Jr. And he was a very fair-skinned man. And he worked for the L&N Railroad, Local National Railroad. He was a Pullman porter. And he was not a family man. And my grandfather told me, he said, son, we got relatives from on the L&N line, every place to stop, more than likely. So from New Orleans up to Chicago. So.
But James Jr., he passed early. He was a young man.
Right, he did.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting that we knew all of his siblings, or knew 4 of them, as you indicated, but we never knew him.
Never knew him.
No,
because he passed in what, 1950 or so.
Oh no! Who?
James
Jr.
passed.
Jr. passed in 1940.
Okay.
Mother barely remembers him.
Oh yeah. Okay.
She barely remembers him. He passed in 1940.
But his siblings, we knew Uncle Felix, Aunt Sadie. I remember them well.
Uncle
Doug.
And Adam. From the census that I looked at, most of them migrated to Chicago. Sadie stayed there quite a while. She worked for the post office there. Adam was there. And it looks like at one point,
was Mike there?
Mike there.
Mike
was there.
He passed.
He was the first one that passed in 1930, and he was the first one. He's the first one at the burial site.
Okay.
Yeah, he was the first one. His wife, Georgia,
that's right.
purchased that.
Uh-huh.
That grave site. Her name was on the grave site. The purchase.
One thing I do not know, and I haven't heard y'all speak of, was about James Sr., who again helped with Fort Negley, was born into slavery. His wife.
She was born into slavery too.
She was under Hadley. She was owned by them. And from what I've read, I have a lot of information from the Bellmead plantation. And
because he was
that was a John Harding.
No, but wasn't James a slave on the Bellmead plantation?
That's what it says here. There are 2 different stories I've gotten. So one of them said that he was on the Hadley plantation. There were the Hardings, and he had a John Harding who had the Bellmead plantation. There was his brother Tom Harding, and McGavick's, and the Davidsons. And these people basically owned Nashville. And I don't know how they changed the slaves, loaned them out to different places. And it's really interesting because John Harding had a sister who had a plantation in Arkansas. Now, what I read in this history of Bellmead, he would say if she needed some extra help, he would send 20 to 30 slaves. And I'm sure they wasn't riding horses and on wagons. And this was back and forth. I mean, imagine walking to and from Arkansas from Tennessee, Middle Tennessee. And so, but it's one account from the Bellmead plantation. And it says that John Harding's son was William Giles Harding, General Harding, okay? And of course, he was with the Confederate. And that said that the federal government, which was the Confederate government, Randall Ewing, reported General Harding that 12 enslaved men from Bellmead were working on Fort Negley, Nashville. An enslaved man named James Harding left Bellmead and joined the 9th Confederate Cavalry under the command of Colonel Jake Biffle in 1863. Then the other story said he ran away and came to Fort Negley and joined the Union Army, and that he was wounded. So pretty sure he was involved with Fort Negley.
I get this close feeling when I come here. Some kind of connection.
See, for me, I did not know that the slaves, until recently, that they built part of Fort Negley, which to me is amazing in and of itself. I mean, some of the, you think of the accomplishments and the things that are done by those past generations, and now understanding what's happened in this historical site, to me, it's like, wow, it just blows my mind. So now, when I bring my children down, the next time I'm in Nashville, I'm bringing them by. I'm taking them to the graveyard and drive them around the graveyard and point those things out. But now I'll bring them all to Fort Negley. Now that I'm a grandfather, they'll have to come because my grandfather did it for me. So,
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. It means a lot. Yeah.
Well, it has a different meaning for me after this year, after the first of the year when I read the article about James Sr. helping to build Fort Negley. I'm saying it just blew me off. I mean, I still don't know what to feel.
Mhm.
I still don't. I never in my mind would have imagined that. So when I saw that online, I said, what? And I immediately sent back to them. I said, look at this. I said, that's Grandpa.
It was amazing to me because last time I've been here, it's probably been 56 years ago. And I was playing baseball in the field over here. And it was a real privilege to come to play in the field over here. But I had no idea that Fort Negley was built by the slaves. And Henry Harding. Years ago when I visited Belly Plantation, and he had ended up owning quite a bit of land around the state capitol. Said he made money by selling pencils on the street in Nashville. You can't sell pencils without much profit. I know it's cheap then, but anyway, he stayed in touch with Bill Harding all his life. I think Bill Harding actually granted him quite a bit of money to purchase the land. He even gave him that money. And he was his headstone is here. He was born in 1825, like 15, 17 years before James. And he's buried at Greenwood Cemetery, close to the other Harding.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Where did Grandpa James Harding Sr. obtain land? How did he obtain much land that he had? Because his grandson told us, who was our grandfather, he always told us to stay away from alcohol. He said, stay away from alcohol because Grandpa was an alcoholic. What was it he told us about a jug of whiskey?
Yeah, and evidently it must have been quite a bit of land. It went around Fisk University, and he said back to Tennessee Central Railroad. I don't remember the Tennessee Central, it did exist here. And he said, Grandpa, he loved whiskey. He said, if he had 3 or 4 good jugs of good whiskey, he would give him an acre of land.
Sell him an acre of land for jugs of whiskey. Yeah. Mm-hmm. He told us, y'all stay away from alcohol. You may not be able to handle it.
After emancipation, why the children left the city after they got older, why he decided to just stay.
I have seen census where he was in Chicago at one time.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Right, sure was,
Yeah.
But what's in most of these pictures like at the house upstairs?
Wait a minute now, man. Nobody knows what the house is. You got to explain the house.
That's my book coming out. Okay, don't reveal too much about the house.
Yeah, we're not gonna reveal about the house.
The house. Tell them what the house is.
Okay, the house was owned by Uncle Felix, and he lived there. And it was upstairs and downstairs, and his main room, he had a lot of pictures. And as they said before, we would go and ask, who is this and where did this come from, to find out about the family.
But what's interesting too about that, Sabrina, Uncle Felix, his father was born into slavery. And
That's
that
right.
trips me out to think about
Yeah,
that.
and ain't Sadie. And I took care of her.
Right.
But did they mention it?
No, he never did.
And I wondered about that. But it was common then.
Right.
It was,
People in
right.
that age their parents were former slaves.
Right.
So mentioning it, it wasn't nothing great, because their parents were the same situation.
Right, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And the house was officially named Harding
Tourist Home. Yeah, that's the official name.
Yeah, it was the Harding Tourist Home, and at times of Jim Crow laws in the South.
Right.
I mean, government sanctioned discrimination, segregation, when black people travel. I think it may have been in the Green Book at one time. And this was a place where, blacks could stay.
And here's a picture of the house. The house with Felix's picture on it. Actually, this is a postcard with a 2-cent stamp on the back. And I guess if you travel there, you could, I don't know if he gave you the postcard or if you had to buy one. And then you could just
more than likely they were a penny here.
Yeah, it was,
No,
he said stamp on the
yeah.
back, one of the original postcards, yeah. And it says it was modern and up to date tourist home.
That's right. But Uncle Felix, I was named after him. I guess it's kind of interesting. And there are 2 stories. Last time we were talking, I had one that Aunt Sadie, his sister, asked my mother when she was carrying me to name me Felix because Uncle Felix was homosexual. He would never have kids. And my father didn't like that at all.
And I was told that Felix asked our mother, if you have a son, will you name him after me? Because I don't have any children. He didn't have any children. Sadie didn't have any children.
Exactly.
Here's a younger picture of him. I don't remember ever seeing him without a suit. Every time we saw him, as far as I know, he had a suit on.
As a matter of fact, I'm going to mention, he is probably, besides being an undertaker or a minister, the only black man I know that wore a suit to work every day.
And actually, when he passed away, show you how my recollection as a young child, they had his viewing at the house. So his body lied in state in the front room of the house.
Of the house, yeah.
And people came over and came in to view his body. But that sticks out in my mind because I was there with my mother and some people were coming to rent rooms there during that time. And we were like, no, well, we're not open at this point. But Harding Tourist Home remained going on even after his passing. But
yeah, you mentioned that also. James Jr.'s body laid over there.
Sure did.
Sure did. I think it was someone else. Wasn't it?
I read some articles in the Nashville Globe where there were other people coming from Chicago who passed, and their bodies were there at the house.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either. What are those right there, Carmen? Those?
Yeah,
Those are the
property deeds for the house.
For the house. Okay.
the house.
The property deeds from when the house went from hand to hand. It looks like Hiram owned it first, and it went to Sadie and Abraham, and then they gave it back to Felix.
Okay.
Yeah, when Uncle Felix passed, I know that he willed it back to Aunt Sadie, and my grandfather ran it for us. So when she passed, she willed it to my grandfather.
They definitely kept it in the family.
Yeah.
But growing up around the house to me was interesting because the first recollection going over there all the time was Uncle Felix. He was there. And our grandfather would go after he left U.S. Tobacco, where he worked for a number of years. He would go over there and work at night. But it was then, at some point, my mother, after Uncle Felix passed away, my grandfather asked my father if it was okay if my mother would come and help out at the house. And so my mother, college-educated woman, after I was born, she went back to Tennessee State and got a degree. And she went in and helped him out. So it was, and the reason we called it the house, it was like the center of our lives for a long time because we referred to it. It's like, I'm going over to the house. We knew where we were going. They're at the house. I'll be at the house. What house are you talking about? And we all, at some point, worked there.
Yes.
We all came under our grandfather and mother, and we worked there and rented the rooms.
Did the laundry, ironed the sheets.
Cleaned the rooms. rooms.
So it was a part of a center of our lives for a long time. And so when he got up and we would work there, he passed away, we all just matriculated around. Kind of that was the center of our family till people started going off to college and getting their own degrees and working and finding out I'm not going to be in the house when it's all said and done. But
Well, you say that. Well, my first job was actually in Oak Ridge. But anyway, when I came home, and that was on the weekends, my grandfather said, "Son, you want to work tonight?" And when I left here in age 76, and I was working for Western, I went to Houston, and they were so often coming from Philadelphia, I'll just stop through. And he said, "I need you to work Saturday evening." You know, I said, "Okay."
Yeah, I think Charles and I worked the longest over there.
Yeah, I think y'all
We
did.
did a team work.
yeah, it was a long lot of work. But
Yeah, it was interesting. But as a matter of fact, my grandfather was, I think he was a very shrewd businessman. Uncle Felix, Aunt Sadie, and Uncle Adam, and Uncle Doug. And you sent me something years ago about their application for Social Security.
Yes.
And it was in 1940 something. And I said, why did they wait so late? And I realized that's when Social Security started.
Yeah, I found their application for Social Security.
And what was interesting, I don't know about the rest of them, but I looked at my Social Security statement and it said that I had qualified, I had satisfied for Social Security benefits in 1959. I said, what had happened? And I figured out my grandfather had me on the payroll. And when it first started, you couldn't do the 10 years, get 40 quarters, okay? So you had to do 4 quarters, 1 year. So he had me on payroll for 1 year. And I said, what has come from in 59? I wasn't working in 59. But I'm sure it was Dad Howard got them to do that, right?
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you want to talk about Daddy Howard too. The one thing about him is he never laid a hand on us. All he had to do was look at us.
No, and his comment was, do I need to
Take my belt
off?
off. Yes, start crying.
He's trying, y'all. He said you fell out of line. But he had to get that from his grandfather.
Somebody.
Right.
Yeah.
Our mother told us, we were older. She said, your grandfather ever spanked y'all. So you said, yes, he did. She said, no, he didn't. All he did was went for his belt, and that's all it took.
Do I need to take my belt?
Asking us the question.
And you'd be like, no.
You know what we're gonna say? Yes.
Yeah, take it off. I dare you. What does it mean to you to know a little bit about our background and history?
For me, it's a blessing. How many other people can go back that many generations?
Right.
How many people do you know can say, I knew my great aunt, great uncle? How many of them even know where they're buried? We still go put flowers on the grave at the cemetery.
Well, Carmen was talking about the grave sites and stuff, and it gives me a chance to, she fills me in on if having questions about it, and it gives me a chance to go back over the history.
Slaves were separated.
Right.
Exactly right.
So it's very difficult to know.
Right.
Their parents were separated from children, husband was separated from wife, and it's difficult.
And even James separated from his father. It was funny reading the history. He was like going on the streetcar. He said, "Oh, let me off the streetcar. I want to go spit on his grave." Because his the owner, the plantation owner, the slave owner, one of his sons, he believed was his father.
Yeah, he said he was told that.
He was told that, but he didn't really know.
Mm-hmm.
I like to know the history because I want my children to understand that, you stand on the shoulders of people
That's it.
who laid down their lives, who had to humble themselves, who had to do things that they didn't want to do, but they did them anyway for another generation to come along.
Right,
So
right.
to me, it's just amazing that we've come this far as a community, and of course, tracing our family history back and understanding we got Caucasian blood also in our blood, but just proud of those who were slaves who came through and made it so that we could be here. So don't take it lightly. That's what I feel.
Well, looking at all the pictures, my son, every now and then, he'll ask, about who is this? And, I give him information that I can. But he's not like really excited about it when he do ask.
Yeah, it's kind of, I think, I don't know, I'm like Charles. I mean, I said, wait, my great-great-grandfather was born in slavery. And so I think when we get older, it'll sink in. Because, I think, 1840, I think that was 400 years ago, but it wasn't.
Again, I think it's important that they understand where we as a family have come from. And, like I said, we're all in professional positions now and have done some great things, I think, in our careers. And understanding it hadn't always been like this. Some people did some things for us and paved the way for us to be where we are today. So, I emphasize it over and over with them to not take it for granted. A lot of sweat, blood, and let's face it, their bodies here, and we don't want to forget that people paved some ways for us. So absolutely, it's a sense of pride.